They taught us to enter like a shadow folded into ceremony, quiet, precise, contained. I had practiced the angle of a blink that meant respect in 6 dialects, the subtle curl of my crest that read as no harm to a dozen undecided courts. The corridor of the human vessel smelled of ozone and coffee and something else, sweating metal, the kind of warm animal scent their scholars called. I recorded it all because we are trained to record before we judge. My hands scaled, filigreed, fingers webbed with the faint shimmer of bioluminescence, rested on the threshold. Beyond the window, the void, bright with cloud-silver stars and a warship that glinted like a blade. Inside, a room small enough to be honest. He lay on a narrow platform, bare to the air that smelled of salt and machine oil, chest rising and falling like the tide of a small sea. When he opened his eyes, they were the messy, dangerous color of living things, brown and uncertain and entirely awake. I arrived with mandate and map. The Council had sent an emissary to this sector because their expansion required order, and order required treaties signed beneath the splintered banners of lesser systems. My training was an archive of ceremonies and threats, of negotiation algorithms and non-lethal incapacitation protocols. I had been raised on the idea that fear-sized primates, humans, should be directed, domesticated into productive alliance, or dissolved as an inconvenient ecology. We call ourselves by titles that unspool like constellations. My name, when spoken in the low hall of my homeworld, unfurled into lineage and duty. The mission was clear: secure compliance, evaluate capacity, and return with the signatures and concessions that would make the sector safe for the Crown's fleets. I expected to be met with trembling. I expected to issue decrees with the steady voice of law and see compliance woven into the pale dawn. What I did not expect was the way the air in the small room shifted when he sat up. Protocol: identify leadership, lay down terms, harvest resources as needed. Protocol: prioritize nonviolent subjugation, employ psychological dominance where possible. Protocol: the human mind is molded by simple hierarchies. Authority is accepted when displayed. I had rehearsed my steps in the echoing halls. Unfurl crest. Demonstrate thermoluminescent insignia. Recite demand in a language patched together from intercepted transmissions. I was to be their queen's mirror, a reflection of might and mercy. The Council's voice hummed in my neural net. Show the magnitude. Demonstrate benevolence to avoid war. We are older than their myths. Our skin carries the memory of nebulae. Our education is measured in orbital cycles. The Council's rhetoric had taught me the comforting arithmetic of superiority, cooler logic, broader vision, fewer emotional pitfalls. Humans are volatile, our instructors warned, unpredictable in their attachments, liable to ignite when the sparks of fear or heroism catch. The belief fit neatly into the uniform I wore in my mind. So I moved forward, crests pulsing in calibrated rhythm, every gesture a treaty. He did not bow. He stared. There was a reckless angle to his gaze, a lack of ritual that pricked at the edges of my training. He touched his chest, a human gesture I later learned signified vulnerability, claim. He spoke a word that was not in my lexicon, a sound like glass struck, and in it there was no plea, no politicking, only a raw, private question. May I stay with you tonight? I held still. The line between diplomatic engagement and intimacy blurred. My protocols did not have a variable for that exact tone: small, dangerous, human. He was not offering allegiance or demanding surrender. He was offering presence. Every faculty in me cataloged the breach. Their culture valorized spontaneity. Ours disciplined it. My training flagged his behavior as a liability and a potential breach of security. My fingers twitched toward the restraint array concealed beneath my court weave. Yet his face, salt-streaked and earnest, asked for no treaty. He was instead a living contradiction, a warrior's scars with a child's blunt honesty. He laughed then. quietly, at something private, and his sound filled the room with an audacity we had recorded as illogical. In the data banks, illogical had been a precursor to violence. In the flesh, it felt like breath. We were still cataloging this anomaly when the emergency klaxon sang through the vessel. The hull shuddered, a sound like tectonic teeth grinding. Through the viewport, a shuttle careened, pocked with plasma burns, trailing smoke and an impossible, desperate light, a child's small pod, tumbling toward the dark surface of a lower deck where a human nursery waited. Everything condensed but clarity. I calculated odds in microseconds. Restraining the humans would preserve order. Allowing them to react could compromise containment. My training hummed, preserve the mission. The human reacted first. He ran. He moved not as a calculated diplomat, but as buoyant, disastrous biology. He leapt from my narrow platform, bare feet hitting the metal with a sound that would have seemed comical if there hadn't been scars down his palms. He ignored protocol, ignored the visible danger to himself. He ignored me, time-bent. The ship's alarm became a distant tide. In that stretch, the world played in slow motion. The child's pod, a bright comet. The human's arm, a living rope. My hand webbed and precise, a blur of instinct only half trained for improvisation. I reached, trained muscles reacting, to intercept, to grasp both and channel them to safety. But the human was closer. He dove, catching the pod with both hands. The impact should have split him open like a seam. Instead, his body folded around the small vessel as if offering itself as armor. His eyes met mine, and in them there was something like prayer. I remember the precise electric taste of fear, mine when the pod struck. Metal screamed. Sparks braided through the air like injured stars. The slow-motion reel rendered each splinter in excruciating detail. The child's tiny fingers curled around a swivel. The human's breath became visible, ragged. A piece of shrapnel arced toward his exposed shoulder. He did not flinch. He used his body as a shield. When the shrapnel tore through the air, it found him first. The wound was not fatal, not at once. It was more sacred invention. He bled in a way that declared ownership over his choices. Nurses, other humans, arrived, breathless and swearing, dragging the child and him both to safety. The child wailed, a raw, owning sound, then stilled, clinging. The human accepted the pain like an old debt paid in full. Around us, militaries would have framed this as a mere anecdote of courage. The council would have called such behavior inefficacious and costly. But as I observed, as my bioluminescence dimmed with something like shame, I cataloged a new variable that did not fit the tidy columns of my training. Deliberate, dangerous care. Respect is an odd thing. Among my people, it is earned through lineage and conquest. Among humans, it arrived messy, forged in the crucible of pain and decision. Watching them, I felt a foreign heat, neither pride nor pity exactly, but an unsteady reverence. Fear grew inside me in tandem. Not because their bodies could harm our fleets, but because their choices contained an explosive calculus our models had not. Encompassed. They were unpredictable in the worst and most dangerous way. Beautiful. I thought of the council's ledger, of the signatures and concessions I had been taught to gather. I thought of ordering submission and receiving instead this, a flash of self-sacrifice, a communal chorus of care, a willingness to bleed for another's breath. In that moment, the neat architecture of domination felt insubstantial. When I returned to Council's channel, my report did not conform. The words I sent were not the measured strings of conquest, but a proposal, trembling with unfamiliar verbs. I proposed alliance. I proposed pause. I proposed an observation period where humans would not be cataloged as resources, but as partners whose moral framework might, in time, become a strategic asset. They called my choice sentimental. They called it weakness. But the galaxy is not ruled solely by cold calculus. Alliances have weight, and the unpredictable weight of human choice could tip wars, seed rebellion, ignite loyalty where machinery offers only obedience. I abandoned the mandate to dominate, not because I had been deceived, but because I had been educated by immediacy. A single child's saved life had rearranged the stars in my mind. Later, in the dimness of the small room, he did not ask for apologies. We stood inches apart, my hand, still flecked with embers from the rescue, resting on his bare sternum where the heart hammered like a drum in a small temple. He closed his eyes and exhaled a laugh that sounded like a map folding. There was silence then, vast and tender, as if the universe itself had paused to listen. I felt the hum of my species' summons at my back, the cold ledger of obligations. Still, in the small, hot space between us, I learned what treaties could become, not signatures on parchment, but the slow grafting of trust. I thought finally of the thing my instructors called dangerous, human unpredictability. It was a jagged, terrible, luminous engine. It could burn worlds, yes, but it could also weld strangers into kin. I left the room with a new mandate unspoken. Protect this potential dot as the hatch sealed behind me and the stars spun their indifferent watch. I whispered, not to the council but to myself, a line I'll carry into the long negotiations ahead. Humanity is terrifying. Yes, but terrifying is not always a flaw. It is power, unruly and alive. If we temper it with wisdom, it could become our greatest ally.